Hi guys, I won't be needing any glue for this video because I'm going to be building this Star Wars Slave 1 kit from Bandai. If you haven't built a Bandai kit before, then you're really missing out. The detail on the kits is excellent, and although they are snap together kits, you genuinely don't need any glue because the precision is so good, they really do stay together very well. I've built a few of these kits now, including the Falcon, the AT-ST and the X-Wing, and I've always enjoyed building each one of them. So looking in the box, there are 6 sprues in total, including this little landing pad here, which I think is supposed to be on Bespin. And Bandai kits typically include normal waterslide decals and then equivalents in sticker form as well, which might be easier for beginner modelers or younger children or something. I got this kit from Japan, so of course all of the instructions are in Japanese. This isn't a significant problem. The instructions are fairly easy to follow, although Bandai do this strange thing sometimes when the steps continue at the top of the page. You can see those there in the black band at the top. As I say, the fit is so good that it won't give you any real challenges. The only difficulty in these kits is planning out the colours. There are no colour callouts during the actual construction. You have to look at the back page here and really look at some reference images. And of course, even though this is Star Wars, it's sci-fi, there are plenty of reference images out there. So I started this kit like any aircraft kit by trying to build sub-assemblies. There aren't really that many on this kit because there are so many different colours that need painting, but the cockpit is a good place to start. And because the engineering is so good and the tolerances are so tight, you do have to be a little bit careful about test fitting these Bandai kits, because you might find you can't get the parts separate again. The kit comes with 2 Boba Fett figures, one seated like this and one standing if you want to pose him outside on the landing pad. I'm going to go with the landing pad option. There are a couple of injector pin marks on a few pieces, but they are exclusively out of the way. So in this piece here, this will get covered up by the seat and the other parts of the cockpit. It just will not be seen. So there's no need to even sand these. These 3 pieces here form the majority of the back of the ship, or the bottom if it's landed. There are lots of pieces that get added to the black piece on the back, as you can see, but before I added those I needed to paint the back black and to paint all the individual pieces as well. The design of these parts is really good. Everything is keyed, so it will only go in one location in one direction. So when you cut them off the sprue, you don't need to worry about labelling them. I just threw them all into a box here, confident that even the pieces which look similar will not go in each other's spots. The sort of wing-like things on the side are one example of a sub-assembly you can build up straight away, because they're all painted that off-white, insignia white kind of colour. But most of the sub-assemblies are like this, where there's only a small number of parts, but each one will be in a separate colour. And so I had to leave these separate and give them at least a base coat of paint first. There are a couple of points to be aware of in the instructions. Here in this step you're told to put this piece on, like so, but about 2 or 3 steps forward in the instructions it shows a different piece being added if you want the ship landed with that ramp down. Luckily I knew that, so I read ahead, but it can be a bit misleading. And you can see another example of this here where this piece C118 is put into place. But if we read ahead in the instructions again, we can see later on there's another piece which will go there instead if you want the ship in the landed configuration. I think Bandai could have improved their instructions here a bit, just to make it clearer that there's an option of which piece you want to use. Because these pieces are hard to remove. Once you push them in place, it's very, very difficult to remove them, even without glue. And so with literally every piece removed from the sprue and just thrown in the box, I started to paint any sub-assemblies and small components that I could. I started with the back here and gave it a flat black base coat and then a dry brush of metallic grey. Most of this will be covered up, but it's worth doing anyway. And then I started to add the painted subcomponents. The Slave one has quite a lot of damage to its paintwork, there's quite a lot of chipping, and that needs some careful planning to get it right. If we look at the colour reference at the back, we can see that basically the base colour of the entire ship is that off-white, very light grey colour. So I painted all of the components with that, even the red base and the green components, they all receive the same light grey base colour. And then I used a standard hairspray chipping technique. So I gave it a coat of hairspray, and then in this case a coat of the red-brown paint. Once that's dried for about 10 minutes you can apply water. And for those of you who are not familiar with the hairspray technique, the water should soak through the paint and it should dissolve the hairspray, which is water soluble. And so if we rub onto the red paint here, the hairspray and the paint on top of it get removed and it reveals the colour of the paint underneath. Here I'm using an old brush which I cut the bristles off to give it quite a sharp, stubby texture. You can use softer brushes as well. You can use tools, you can use skewers, all kinds of different things to get different effects. And this technique is quite time sensitive, so I did this component with the hairspray and the red paint. Then I moved on to the next component with the hairspray and the red paint. Overall the chipping could take a few hours, and you don't want pieces to be sat around with the paint drying for a few hours because the chipping effect you'll get at the end will be very different to the pieces you do at the beginning. And you can see the effects there of the different sizes and types of brush. I think overall that's starting to look a little bit like a nice piece of damaged paintwork, and it fits onto the rest of the ship quite nicely. And I used a similar technique for the other pieces as well. On this particular piece I'm using quite a fine brush because I want a much lighter chipping effect. And in this case I'm keeping the chipping confined to the panel lines. And I repeated this technique for all of the items that needed chipping. For this part of the ship the effect was slightly different. I didn't want to go over the entire piece in green because most of it is actually chipped away. So I went over some areas that should be green, but of course now I've got that very feathered edge of the airbrush. So what I'm trying to do here with the chipping technique is to roughen up just the edge of the paint. I want to give it the appearance of having been chipped away at the edge rather than smoothly sprayed on. With hindsight, this green isn't really accurate. It doesn't match the green on the instructions. But to be honest, I'm running out of paint and colours, and I can't get to my model shop because we are locked down. So beggars can't be choosers. It's close enough anyway, and I like the look of it, and that's the important thing. I think there, by the end of that now, that looks much better. It looks like that green paint has more or less entirely chipped away to reveal the white beneath. And then it was just a case of putting all the pieces together. And you'll notice the way that Bandai have designed this so that pieces in a separate colour are moulded separately, so there's no need to mask any of these panels here on this piece. Just paint the separate piece green and then whack it on when it's done. It's really, really handy. It's really nice design. The tolerances here are so tight that sometimes even just one layer of paint will throw them out, and it makes the fit a little bit harder to attain. But if you persevere, you will get there. Okay, that's really starting to look like a Slave 1, especially with that glass there now over the cockpit. I'm just going to paint that little panel black before I put that glass in permanently. There's the rear. And then the last thing I did was use some Tamiya black panel liner and let the capillary action take the liquid down the panel line. You can see here that I've got a few blobs of excess around, so you can tidy that up with a paintbrush which is just dampened slightly with an enamel thinner. Or you can also use a Q-tip that's dampened with an enamel thinner as well. You do have to be a bit careful with the Bandai plastic because if you soak it in enamel thinner, it will go brittle and it will crack. In terms of decals, there aren't many to add, and you can see that the majority of them are sections that I've already painted on instead. The only ones I really need to use are these small red ones in the top right hand side. And as I mentioned earlier, you have the choice of the waterslide decals or the stickers. And here you can see the 3 or 4 decals which I added. And with that done, here is the final result. Well guys, thank you very much for watching. Well done for getting to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed the build. If you do manage to get your hands on one of these kits and you're a Star Wars fan, then I would say snap them up, and I hope to see you next time.